Arkadaşlar merhaba, birkaç dakika daha bekleyelim lütfen. Okay. Hello, good afternoon, dear participants. We are together in hall 3 and we will listen to 5 papers. These papers name, first papers in Turkish language, COVID-19'un elektrik piyasası ve elektrik ithalat, ihracatına etkileri. Umut Erksan Şenalp tarafından. Türkçe sunacaksınız galiba Umut Bey. Değil mi? Öyle verilmiş, Türkçe verilmiş. Sesinizi duyamıyorum.
Merhaba, slaytlar Türkçe ama bir yurt dışı katılımcı gözlemliyorum aramızda. İngilizce sunabilirim, devam edelim.
Sizin tercihinize kalmış bu.
Tamam, İngilizce devam edeyim o zaman.
Peki. And second paper analysis of the effect of airspace closure of countries on economic costs pre-COVID-19 and after COVID-19 comparison from Gülcan Güzel. Another paper, Health Economics and COVID-19 and International comparison of 1, 2, 3. Second paper, analysis of the effect of the airspace closure of countries on economic costs pre-COVID-19 and after COVID-19 comparison. And another paper, economic costs of COVID-19 outbreak for the airline companies, the struggle to survive from Gülcan Güzel. Another paper, Health Economics and COVID-19, an international comparison of healthcare accessibility from Suzan Odabaşı. And last paper, impact of COVID-19 on palm oil production in Indonesia, a review toward energy and economic resilience in time of pandemic. Now, first paper, Umut Erksan Şenalp, COVID-19'un elektrik piyasası ve elektrik ithalat ihracatına etkisi. Presentation time for one paper is 10 minutes. Okay. Umut Bey buyurun.
All right then, thank you very much. Just let me quickly share my screen. Okay. I think I managed to share the screen. Yeah, okay. Well, the title of the paper is in Turkish. I prepared the slides in Turkish, but I will translate all the written information in here into English while I'm presenting. I wasn't expecting that I am going to present in English, but no problem. The title of the paper is The Effect of COVID-19 on the Electricity Market. Well, according to the International Electricity Energy Agency, following the COVID-19, the electricity or energy demand in the world decreased around 4% the first 4 months of the pandemic, and in the meantime, the renewable energy supply increased while the conventional energy supply decreased, like coal-fired or gas-fired or nuclear power supply. So following this disruption in supply and demand side of the market, the energy prices also plummeted, and it decreased around 28% globally. So the talk that I'm going to give is mainly about this, and I will explain the situation in Turkey, what happened in the energy market after the COVID-19 pandemic. So the outline of the paper is as it is. So I will briefly talk about the literature because it's not an extensive literature, because the COVID-19 is quite a recent issue. And I will quickly talk about the aim of the paper, then provide you some preliminary results. Actually, they are not results, but some statistical some descriptive statistics, and will give you my conclusion on this issue. And there are not many papers on this issue, but it's growing literature because there's a huge impact of COVID-19 on the electricity market. For instance, this Hosseini 2020 argues the effect of COVID-19 on the renewable energy supply and explains that this economic atmosphere created by COVID-19 heavily damaged the renewable energy investments, etc. But you will see in a moment that the renewable energy supply, or at least the share of renewable energy in total supply, increased during the pandemic. So we will talk about the future of green energy in Turkey in the end of this presentation, as well as we will see the effect of this pandemic on energy pricing, and it has an impact on export and import, energy export and energy import of Turkey, which is quite important for this country because Turkey is energy dependent country and 80% of its energy is coming from abroad. So it has a huge impact on its current account deficit. So like papers like Ruan et al. 2021, Leach, Rivers and Schaffer, and Rath and Akram examines the same issue for different countries like US, Canada and India. And all concludes that the demand globally decreased and the prices also decreased. And it has a huge effect on the energy market. So again, briefly, the aim of this paper is basically observe the effect of this pandemic on Turkish energy market, especially on the demand and supply side and on the pricing. And we'll talk about the energy trade, foreign trade figures. Our data is coming from two main sources, EPDK, which is the institution that regulates the energy markets. And the other source of the data is EPH. A private company is running the energy market. So this second data set provides quite extensive data, which is in real time. Okay, in mainly, briefly, in Europe, following the pandemic in between March and April, the energy, especially electricity demand, decreased heavily. So the first line is Italy, the second one is Spain, for obvious reasons. Those two countries are the most harmed countries after the pandemic. But the red line shows the average for the Europe, so around 15% in electricity demand decrease observed in the Europe. And not only in the Europe, but in South America, we observe a similar pattern. Following the COVID-19, between March and June, in Uruguay, Dominican Republic, Panama, Nicaragua, in almost all countries, you observe electricity demand decrease. So it's common in almost all countries in the world. A similar thing happened in Turkey. I converted this real-time data, hourly data it is, I converted it to weekly data, and here we see that this red line represents the heavy restrictions imposed by Turkish government. And following this, as you can see, the electricity demand decreased dramatically. It's around 40%. In the vertical area we see percentage change. What I mean by percentage change of between 2020 and 2019 for the same period of time. So March, April, and May here are, and those numbers at the end of the name of the months are representing the number of weeks. So first week of March, second week of March, and following the restrictions, we observe this sudden decrease in electricity demand in Turkey. But following the beginning of June, after the new normal era, we observe that this shares turn to positive, which means that the electricity consumption increase, the demand increase, following the new normal. But let's have a quick look at the change in electricity demand by user type. So the first line, Sanayi, is manufacturing, really, and the third one is this one, business. Let's focus on only these two user type. In March, in business side, 15% decrease we observe in electricity demand, and in April, things get worse, and in manufacturing, energy demand decreased around 22%, while the business side decrease is around 30%. And it continues on May, and it's even higher figures. For business side, 33% decrease in energy demand, and manufacturing 23%. So what I'm trying to say, following the pandemics, 3 months, both in manufacturing and in business sectors, energy demand decreased, but it decreased heavily on business side. So as you can see, in June, after the new normal, manufacturing goes back to normal and the demand increase, while the decrease in demand continues for the businesses. So it was the supply and demand side. Let's have a quick look at the supply side. In supply side, this diagram shows the sources of supply. This one is coal, and this one is brown coal, I would say. And actually, these all conventional type of electricity production. It's all fossil based. So, and here we have solar and wind power, which increased around 30%. So renewable energy, the share of renewable energy in terms of energy production, energy supply increased in Europe. Same thing happened in Turkey. Let's have a quick look at the table, since the time is limited, I will only highlight the green energy, like this one is wind power, increases 34%, and solar power 141%. So these are huge increases for the share of this type of energy production for this diagram between 2019 April and 2020 April, between these 2 years for the same period. And we see that all this conventional production type, their share in the total production decreases. It happens in May as well. We observe that green energy and its share increasing. Like here, the solar is like 125% increase, and the wind power like increased 31%. But in overall, as you can see, 17, 16 or 18% decreases in the energy production. But as we can see, energy demand decreased, energy supply also decreased, but the demand decreased more than the supply. And this has an effect on the energy price. Let's have a quick look at it. European market. Those red lines shows the number of days that we observe negative electricity price, the number of days that we observe negative electricity price. And this has happened in the previous years as well, but not as big as this. So for instance, in Germany, almost half of the year, we observe negative prices in the electricity market because of the excess supply. And in Netherlands, for instance, although that it has never happened before, in 2020, we observed negative prices in the market. And again, in Iceland as well. It happened in Belgium and Czech Republic and Finland, not that big for Finland, but happened in many countries. But for Turkey, this is the real time prices, and it's an example from the 5th of April. Those are the system marginal prices. So this is the price which is determined by the system based on the actual demand and actual supply for that hour. And we observe these zero numbers, which means that the price of real electricity is zero. So we observe this for many days in April because of the excess supply. And this has an effect on the energy pricing as well. Let's have a quick look at this average of this system marginal price that I calculated based on the real data and real-time data. And following this pandemic, and in April, there's a huge decrease in the price of electricity. These numbers are 350, 300 is the Turkish lira per megawatt hour. So it's the price of electricity drops a huge percent. I will show you what percentage is. And then it comes back following the new normal period. But for the April and May especially, there's a huge decrease in the price of electricity. And I just made this table to make it clear. In 2020, between March and April, the decrease was 41%. Then I thought that maybe this is because something happened in between March and April. Maybe it happens every year. Maybe it's because of change of the season. Maybe it's because of the change in currency. So I calculated the same percentage for the previous years. So in 2019, we observed 15% decrease in the electricity price for the same period. But for 2018, there was a 15% increase for the same time. So there's no clear pattern really. And in 2016, for instance, 7% increase in prices. So I took the average of these 4 years and I observed that in the previous 4 years, between March and April, the energy prices increased 175%. But when I go back and look at the 2020 scenario after the pandemics, the price decreased around 41%. So it's clearly COVID effect. And I got the statistics from Turkish Statistical Institute to check the effect of this pricing and effect of demand and supply disruption on energy supply and electricity import and export. So here we have this diagram. The blue line represents the export, and the brown one is the blue one is import, the brown one export. So export values decreasing gradually over the year, but following COVID, the import of electricity decreased heavily. So these are again key megawatt hours. So the decrease is huge, almost 50%, and then goes back to normal values of the year. So following the new normal. So clearly the pricing has an effect on the import of electricity, as well as the demand decrease has an effect on it. So to conclude, since I have a short time to conclude the paper, so these are the preliminary analysis, but what we are trying to get is that this is clearly a demand shock, can be considered as a demand shock on electricity market. And what we observe that decrease in import is not persistent. So what Turkey is aiming to do is to decrease the consumption of electricity and decrease the import of electricity. Because, as I said, the country is energy dependent, and it has a huge impact on the current account deficit. So what we observe from these figures and diagrams, that if Turkey managed to invest, if the country managed to carry on investing in green energy and follow the action plan on the energy productivity or energy efficiency plans, then it will definitely have an effect on these import figures. So what the country needs to do is to carry on investing on green energy, and as well as try to figure out how the energy efficiency goals will be fulfilled. So this is all from me today, and thank you very much for listening. And I can get any questions if you have. I don't know now or at the end of session, it's up to you. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Şenal. I think you are from Trakya University, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Department?
It's economics.
Economics, okay. I have a question.
Yeah.
To this period, COVID-19, is there any incentive, specifically electric energy incentive by the state?
Do you mean in terms of production?
Yes.
As far as I know, because, well, this supply side is mostly dominated by long-term contracts. So basically those centrals or grids and electricity suppliers has a contract which is covering the long term. But what we observe is that green energy increase in the same period of time. So we know that clearly there are incentives to increase the green energy, but not specifically for COVID. And we can observe that those incentives pays out. So this is, I think, only thing I can say. As far as I know, no, there is no direct incentives given or provided by the government to supply side.
Thank you. Dear participants, any question? Okay. Thank you for your presentation,
Well,
Mr.
thank you.
Cenab.
Thanks.
Okay. Another presentation from Gülcan Güzel, Deniz Sulu, Ümit Aydın, and another presentation, Gülcan Güzel. Gülcan Güzel is here. Is meeting? No. Okay. Another presentation, Suzan Odabaşı. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Health Economics and COVID-19, an international comparison of health care accessibility.
Right.
Your word.
Thank you so much. I will try to share my screen. Actually, as Dr. Şener, my presentation is in Turkish, but I will try to translate it in simultaneously to reach out our international listeners. So my name is Suzan Odabaşı, sorry. I earned my PhD degree recently in the United States, and currently I'm working, actually I work at Uşak University. So my work is titled as Health Economics and COVID-19. It is an international comparison, but during my presentation, little bit it changed. First, I would like to explain this outline. At the first stage, I will try to explain what motivates this study. And it says there is an error. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So secondly, I will try to explain what the research question, and then I will try to explain what is my used in the study. Then I will try to explain the results and conclusion part. Actually, this study is new and in progress. So I will be very happy to hear your suggestions and feedbacks at the end of the presentation, actually for the model part. So firstly, I would like to explain the motivation part. During the pandemic, we know that two questions are very popular in the COVID-19 literature, actually in social sciences. The first one is about how to reach health care, and the second one is the economic results of the pandemic. So as a health economic part, I should say, when we look at the from health economics, we can see that unemployment rates and income levels are two important parts. So we should try to understand what are the dynamics to affect the income level and unemployment. So when we look at the recent reports, one of them is published from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States. It says since 1929, it is the biggest crisis. Actually, when we look at the unemployment rate, we see the highest numbers. And another point is, when we look at the database in OECD for these countries, we see that also there are some kind of increases, but this is not as sharp as the United States. For example, in the United States, the unemployment rate is increased almost 10 times, but in OECD, we don't see this kind of increases. So let me share my research objective, research question. So I will try to explain I would like to explain the impact of several economics and medical factors on the COVID-19 related mortality. Firstly, when we look at, I think I should share full screen. Anyway, so yes, as you see on the screen, United States experienced has the highest numbers in unemployment rates. For example, it's in April 2019, it was about 8%. 1 year later, we see that it is reached out almost 15%. When we look at for different industries and demographic classes, we see some kind of different impacts. I will try to explain them in next slides. Then for the OECD again, we see that in April 2019, the unemployment rate was 5.2%. 1 year later, just after the pandemic started, it was about 8% for. So for the United States, we see that there is hot topics actually during pandemics. First of all, we see that unemployment rate is not increased as much. How can I say? Yes, we see unemployment rate is increased almost for all industries, but several of them has more loss. For example, we can say hotel industry and accommodation. Unemployment rate is almost 40%. So the interesting part is in the finance, we don't see the unemployment rates is very high. So to explain the relationship between the variables, I benefit from two models. The first one is, as you see on the screen, the dependent variable, the COVID-19 related mortalities. For the left, so right-hand side variables, I included several economic and medical factors. For example, GDP, Gini coefficient, and health expenditures are some of them. For the medical parts, I use two more variables. These are obesity rates in the population and number of doctors per 1,000 people. In addition, we see unemployment rate in the model 1. For the model 2, this time we see unemployment rate is the dependent variable. So we keep the other right-hand side variables same here, except unemployment rate. So I would like to share the information on my data. Relatively, we use a small data set here because it is a cross-section data set and we included OECD countries. The main limitation was data availability because we don't have data access for all the variables and all the countries. So after data merging and cleaning process, we have very limited number of countries. This one is one of our limitations. So for the unemployment rate, we see that the minimum value is 2.7. We see it for Czech Republic. Then for the mortality rates, it shows the number of mortalities in 1 million population. So when we look at the independent variables, the first one is average household income level. This is in dollar currency. It is an annual data. The second one is health expenditures. It includes all kind of expenditures like individual level, governments, and voluntary ones. The other one is number of doctors for 1,000 people. And as you see, the minimum value is 1.9. This is from Turkey. Actually, when we look at the data set, we see number from again is United States. The first one is obesity rate. Actually, when
Suzan Hanım.
1 second. Yeah, now can you hear me? I think we had an unexpected problem. Can you hear me right now? Okay, thank you. Because my screen looks a little bit different. So for obesity rates, we use BMI indicator. If BMI indicator is higher than 25, we accept it is like obesity or overweight. The last table is Gini coefficient. For the Gini coefficient, we try to analyze the income distribution. So for these two models, I use two approaches. The first one is weighted OLS. The second one is logistic regression. Actually, the problem was I have relatively small data sets. Because of this reason, I don't have much option. So the first table, which you see right now, shows the unemployment rates. The second one, as you see right now, it shows the mortality rates. I will try to summarize the results from the analysis. Firstly, Gini coefficient looks like one of the most impactful variable. If the Gini coefficient, if it has higher number, we see higher unemployment rates. Secondly, the number of doctors has importance. An increase in the number of doctors shows that unemployment rates are likely to have lower numbers. And lastly, we can say Gini coefficient and unemployment rates are statistically significant with mortality rates. When we compare the results from the logistic regression model, we see that again unemployment rate has statistically significant results with Gini coefficient and doctor numbers, number of doctors. And secondly, for the COVID-19 related mortality, we see that unemployment rate is the only variable which has impact on the mortality. As a result, we can say the results from these two models almost parallel. I mean, they are very close. So the Gini coefficient, I mean, income distribution is one of the most important factors which has impact on unemployment rate and mortality. In this case, at this point, we can say with this study, our aim is to give an idea to policymakers to decide about some health workers' employment. You know that it's a public health problem. It's also an economic issue, and with the employment of health workers, it will be helpful for not only public health but also economic side. So this is all I would like to share, and I will be very happy to hear your questions, additionally suggestions, particularly for model part.
Suzan Adabaşı, thank you. I have not question, but I think Mr. Şenalp question.
I do, yes. Thank you. Well, thank you for the presentation. Can we go back to the model one? I think I may suggest something on that.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh yeah, here you try to explain the number of deaths for different countries, right? So you said it's a cross section.
Yes.
Well, different countries impose different restrictions over the period following COVID-19. So it clearly, like social distance, closure of schools, etc. So it may explain the difference between the countries. So the Oxford University has an excellent index for government response. It's called Government Response Tracker of COVID, something like that. So it's, if you just put Oxford University Government Response Tracker on Google, you will easily find it. So it gives a number between 0 and 100 and compares the countries in terms of the level of restrictions. So I think that variable may add some value on this regression.
Right, thank you so much. Actually, I was thinking when you asked the question, a dummy variable could be a good option too. But I think we will have a better data, statistics on it. Definitely, I will check it as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
No, it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Other question? No. Thank you, Suzan Odabaşı, for your presentation. And last paper from Indonesia, from Arif Amir Rahman Setiawan. Yeah,
Yes,
welcome.
hello.
Impact of COVID-19 on palm oil production in Indonesia. A review toward energy and economic resilience in time of pandemic. Welcome to meeting. Welcome to Turkey. Yes, your word.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Yasin, and thank you to the organizer of this excellent conference. Please allow me to share the screen. Sorry, I think I need to close the video because the internet is unstable from my place. Okay. My name is Arif Amir Rahman Setiawan. I'm a researcher in the Research Center for Policy and Management of Science and Technology at the National Institute of Science. And currently, I take doctoral degree program at the University of Tsukuba. And I would like to present my study on the impact of COVID-19 on palm oil production in Indonesia, a review toward energy and economic resilience in time of pandemic. So my presentation will be divided into 4 sections, starting with the introduction, methods, result, and discussion, and conclusion. So as we have known so far, it almost 1 year, it has passed over 1 year of the pandemic. And in Indonesia, the first COVID case detected was on the 2 March of 2020. And so far, we have positive case about 1.5 million people get infected. And now we have vaccine. Vaccinated people is around 9 million. And I have just also get vaccine 3 days ago. And this pandemic has impact various sector and slowed down the economic growth. Particularly in our country, Indonesia, the growth has minus 1.5%. According to the news, our growth is the second after China. In terms of the population size. So, according to the report of OECD, the COVID-19 has last over a year, and the impact on the global agriculture is expected last over a decade. However, in Indonesia, the agriculture, including oil palm, growth positively during 2020 and contributed around 13% toward the gross domestic products. So we can see in this picture among the sectors in Indonesia, only agriculture have positive growth in terms of GDP. And particularly in the oil palm sector, it employs around 2.3 million of farmers and 4.6 million of workers. It's not included indirect workers, which is estimated around 9 million people. So, and in the 2020, the last year, the export of palm oil increased 9% in terms of value, but the volume is a bit decreasing. That's why last year oil palm sector still growing, and the production also expanding. It can be seen in this figure, the area and the production still increasing. And in Indonesia, the owner of palm oil plantation can be categorized into three owners: smallholder farmers, private company. This is a large company usually, and also national state-owned enterprises. And this is the data of export, and this is the destination of export. It includes also Turkey in here. And in this study, the research question is two research questions. The first one is what are the impact of COVID-19 toward palm oil sector, and the second one is how the palm oil sector survive in time of pandemic, and especially how it's related to the national energy and economic resilience. So the method is based on case study. I review some related journal proceedings, paper, report, and also do some cross-check on the related stakeholder, and then do some interpretation. So according to my study and the finding, and first we analyze the supply chain and downstream product of palm oil. Then we identify the pandemic impact. Then also related to the economic and energy resilience. So the supply chain can be simplified in this figure. We have known previously that the plantation owned by three categories, and then from the oil palm plantation, the product delivered to the oil palm mill. Then after this, continue to the refinery. And from the refinery, the product can be converted into palm oil or palm stearin. And this is the palm oil downstream product. So it can be seen here that from fresh fruit bunch, it can be converted into many products. The main product is crude palm oil, and from the CPO, it can be converted into many downstream products. And one of the famous product we know is cooking oil. Aside from salad oil, margarine, shortening, and there is also biodiesel. Aside from the main CPO, the palm oil plantation also has the residue or waste, which can also be converted into valuable products. For example, in here, empty fruit bunch can be used for mulching or can be converted also into ethanol, lignocellulosic ethanol. While the effluent can also be used for the fertilizer or animal feed or also electricity power plant. So we also have identified the pandemic impact on the palm oil. So basically the large scale restriction has some impacts on the palm oil supply chain. Particularly in the transportation of raw material and products, and also the manufacturing process, since the worker usually they came from different region, and with the large scale restriction they are forced to work from home, which is difficult in the plantation. And according to the survey, in the Sahara, the average income also decreasing around 63%. Fortunately, palm oil also used in last year. The government increased the proportion of biodiesel. The combination of blending from biodiesel with the diesel, fossil diesel is increased from 20% to 30%. Because this composition, the output of palm oil can be absorbed by the market in the vehicle fuel. In addition, the palm oil market also get benefit from the use in soap and detergent, because such as sanitizer, for sterilizing hand soap. According to study, we've also found that farmer which has a link to a community or association has better chance to survive, because they have a network, and usually the network is also linked to international market, so they can find a niche small targeted market. And also some farmer also do another work to survive, whether it is related to agriculture or not. And lastly, there are also finding that suggest farmer not only to plant with palm oil only, but also other commodities to improve the resilience toward pandemic.